What's up guys, Brandon here from Gearist. Today we're here at beautiful Hall Ranch in Lyons, Colorado, and we're going to be getting down and dirty with the Peregrine 6 from Saucony. In 2015, I got the chance to take a look at the Saucony Peregrine number 5, this guy right here. Now at the time leading into it, the Peregrine 4, some people had mentioned that it was a little stiff. It was kind of unwieldy because of that stiffness. It didn't perform the way they wanted it to. However, when I got my hands on it and my feet subsequently into it, I found that it was a shoe that was actually pretty quick, relatively light, and very flexible. In fact, more flexible at the time than the Kinvara number 5. So with that in mind, I was really excited to get my hands on the Peregrine 6 and see exactly how Saucony was going to be able to improve upon such a great shoe. So today we're going to be talking about this guy right here with input from myself and our newest contributor, Lori. Now before we get to talking about this guy, I want to make sure that you guys are aware that when we put some things down in the description of this video, whether you're watching it on YouTube or on our site, we do our best to find some good deals on stuff like this. So while this is a relatively new shoe and you probably won't be able to buy it, definitely check those links, because if you shop through those links, whether you buy this shoe, you buy a pair of socks, you buy a pack of popsicle sticks, whatever it is, every time you buy something through one of those links, it helps to support Gearist, and that is a huge help in making us this a really big dream that we have. As always, we're going to begin with the outsole of the shoe, and just for comparison's sake, you can see the big difference from the Saucony Peregrine 5 to the Peregrine 6. Now in the Peregrine 6, this is a full contact outsole, which you can see there. There are no major cutaways for the arch or anything like that. This is a good thing in terms of traction and giving you that level platform and ground feel. The material of the outsole is actually Saucony's new Power Track material, PWRTRAC. So it's P-W-R-T-R-A-C. This material is a tacky rubber, which is meant to kind of deal with adverse conditions, see wet, nasty, and ugly. And in this case, a lot of times we find that some sort of tacky or softer rubbers can tend to be a little less durable than other things, but we're going to talk about that in a second. Now that rubber here is broken down into 86, that's right, I counted 86 individual lugs in the front of the shoe oriented for ascending, in the rear of the shoe oriented for descending. However, they both handle well in either case. So if you're a forefoot lander, even on downhills and things like that, you're still going to have plenty of solid traction when descending. First, let's talk about the traction of the shoe. Now, with this tackier rubber, I was very interested to see how it turned out, and both Lori and I found that it gripped on pretty much anything we could throw at it. In fact, Lori really actually liked running in the shoe in that kind of mucky snow and ice junk. Not necessarily slick ice, but just the stuff where snow has been torn up and then frozen and all that kind of stuff. She never hit the deck. It did very, very well. I've run in this in snow, dry pavement, some mud, things like that, and every single time it does really well. Of course, these are only 5mm deep lugs, and when you get into some of that slippery clay-like mud, which we tend to have here in Colorado, sometimes it can give out because it's not super cleat-like, though it's doing a pretty good job. But to be fair, that is the case for pretty much any shoe out there. One thing that is worth mentioning, and because Lori mentioned it and we thought we should point it out to you guys, and this is not necessarily a bad thing because overall it contributes to the traction of the shoe, but you can see how far these lugs here on the medial aspect of the shoe stick out. Now if you're someone who, when you're running, you tend to nick or kick your other ankle, that lateral or medial malleolus that's kind of sticking out there, you may find yourself nicking your ankle with these. And since they're kind of sharp-ish, I guess, for soft rubber, you could wind up actually getting a little cut or nick or something like that. So again, not a bad thing. This definitely contributes, especially in really off-camber terrain, to the overall duration profile and overall traction profile of the shoe. But just be aware that that may be something that if you have a tendency to kick your opposite leg when you're coming through in the follow-through of your leg or trailing leg, that you may nick something with that. Also with regard to the traction, here again is the Peregrine 5, and you can see how the lugs are larger. And in this case, in the Peregrine 6, with the smaller, more individually articulated lugs, we found that this really enhanced the grip. And this is one of the places, again, I said I wasn't sure how they were going to improve on the 5, but this is definitely a place where that is an improvement by making smaller and more articulated lugs. As for durability, both Lori and I have right around 40 miles in this shoe, purely trail. Sometimes it's a path or something like that, but generally speaking, trail. And it did very, very well. The only place that I can really see anywhere on my shoe is right about in here, and then right down in kind of here, kind of the the fore part of the heel-ish, because this is generally where I'm going to wear a shoe, being a really midfoot, forefoot lander anyway. So the Power Track rubber, which I kind of was skeptical about being a little softer and tackier rubber, has held up really well, and its wear is pretty much the same as it is on the Saucony Peregrine 5. It might be a hair better on this, but with 40 miles on it, we see pretty close to the same amount of wear. Moving into the midsole, now you guys have heard me compare this already in the beginning of this to the Saucony Kinvara series. We compared the Kinvara 5 to the Saucony Peregrine 5, and in this case the Saucony Kinvara 7, which is now the shoe that is out in that lineup from Saucony, is very, very similar, especially in the midsole area. Now the biggest place that we see this is in the inclusion of Saucony's new EVERUN material. It's a type of TPU foam that we've talked a lot about before, basically very, very springy and bouncy, not unlike Adidas Boost foam. And like the Saucony Kinvara number 7, where that also has EVERUN, the Saucony Peregrine 6 chooses to put just an insert in the heel, so that basically, if I could cut it open, I could show you, but right in here, about this distance right here, and then about that width, inside the midsole, there's an embedded piece of this foam. Now, why did they choose to just put it there? As we asked this question surrounding the Kinvara 7, Saucony told us it was because they didn't want to disturb the overall feel of the shoe, because people that run in the Kinvara are really legacy Kinvara users much of the time. So they went to Saucony Kinvara users and wear testers and said, here's a full-length version of EVERUN, here's a midfoot only, here's a rear foot only, here's a forefoot only, what do you guys like? And rear foot only is really where they wound up going with that. So that is exactly the same thing that we see here in the Saucony Peregrine 6. The remainder of the outsole, and basically the stuff that you can see here, is Saucony's super light SSL EVA foam. Does a good job, nice and lightweight, pretty responsive, and holds up well. I mean, there's nothing that we have to complain about in terms of the durability of the midsole. Of course, we don't only have 40 miles on it, and trails tend to be a little more gentle on materials like that than roads do. For those of you guys looking for some trail protection, and we certainly loved it, is this EBO. You can see it kind of looks like little bits of carbon fiber in between the lugs there. It's a forefoot and rear foot EBO rock plate that is in there. Now, this is definitely one of the things that both Lori and I, when we were running together, commented onto each other. We were like, are you noticing the amazing ground feel of this? This really has spectacular ground feel for a not super minimalist shoe. You really feel everything that's going on, but you're still protected from the sharp and jabby stuff. So good job with the EBO rock plate there. This is actually seemingly in spite of the fact that the Saucony Peregrine 6 has 4 more millimeters of stack than the Peregrine 5. This shoe has 25 millimeters of stack in the heel, 21 millimeters of stack in the forefoot, whereas the Saucony Peregrine 5 has 17.5 millimeters of stack in the forefoot and 21.5 millimeters of stack in the rear foot. Both have a net drop of 4 millimeters, keeping that geometry the same in there, but it really is astounding to me. The ground feel of the Saucony Peregrine 5 was great, the Peregrine 6 was great, regardless of the fact that there is a little bit more stack in there. You don't really notice much difference. And once again, for those that were kind of hung up on the inflexibility or the apparent inflexibility of the Saucony Peregrine 4, this is maintaining that amazing flexibility from the Peregrine 6. I mean, both these shoes are super flexible, do a great job really giving you good amount of agility on trails, and we'll talk, of course, more about that in the ride section. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of the upper, I want to point out something that was a little bit surprising and curious to me. Since the Peregrine 5 came out, Saucony has introduced 2 new upper fit systems. Number 1, the ISOFIT system, which we can see in the Saucony Zealot ISO, as well as the Triumph ISO and Triumph ISO 2, which we recently reviewed. You can check those out by just clicking on over, or just click this button right here. It'll take you to those reviews. The second system, which was actually adapted from Saucony's racing flats and then used in the Kinvara series, both the 5, 6, and 7, is the ProLock system. Neither of these systems are being used in the Peregrine, where I feel both of them might actually be advantageous, especially the ISOFIT. Of course, it might also add a little bit of weight, but nevertheless, this upper still does a good job, so let's start talking about it. The mesh body of the upper of this shoe is a single layer of mesh, which is simultaneously very breathable, but it also does a great job of keeping even fine debris out. Some of that really dusty stuff is still going to get through there, but that's pretty much the case with anything that wants to have any amount of breathability to it. The support structure of this is made from Saucony's Flex Film. We see the little label right there that says Flex Film. It's very durable. They've been proving this over and over again since even version 1 of the Saucony Kinvara way back in like 2009 or something like that, 9 or 10, and they execute it very well in this shoe. It's reinforced from the backside and just has a very, very good feel, and it keeps the shoe supported and durable across even really technical and rough and off camber terrain. The tongue is gusseted within about 1.5 inches of the collar up here, so in other words the gussets stop right about there. One thing that I think is notable, not a huge deal, is that there are no lace guides on the tongue, no any loop or anything like that to keep the tongue from having any lateral or medial slide. Now the gussets do take care of that largely and didn't bother me at all. It did slide over a little bit. You can actually see it resting kind of over to that lateral side a little bit. Didn't really bother me. But just be aware of it. The gussets, again, tend to take care of most of that tongue float in there. The heel counter in this shoe is actually quite rigid. I mean, especially as you get down here toward the actual midsole, you can't bend it when pushing it from the back. You can get a little bit of flexibility in from the sides. This is actually a pretty good thing on this type of trail, especially where we are here at Hall Ranch, which can be really, really off camber and throw a lot at you. And you want that stability or that lockdown feeling in the heel cup to be able to give you the ability, well, rather the ability to kind of put the screws to the shoe and keep your balance and kind of fight through stuff like that. Moving into the tongue with regard to the foam, there's a great amount of foam in there. It doesn't bother me at all. Around the collar, there's a bit much. It could slim down just a tad. However, Lori had an interesting point about this that I hadn't really thought about before, where I think they could probably lose a little of this foam here just in terms of mass and in terms of overall weight. It would probably shave 1/2 ounce off the shoe, which is pretty light for a trail shoe anyway. I would like to see it trimmed down a little bit just for that weight thing, but Lori's interesting point to me was that while it's very, very comfortable around here, the additional advantage of it is that it's in contact with the lower leg, right below the ankle there, around just below the malleolus and the Achilles and all that, and it actually keeps any debris or a lot of debris from kind of coming over the top and down into the shoe. Really interesting take on it that I hadn't thought of before, but if you look at it like that and you tend to get a lot of stuff coming in, whether it's because of the way you kind of lift your foot off the ground or move through your gait, that was a really interesting observation from Lori. The final thing I want to mention about this upper, it's a bit of an Easter egg, and because you may not be able to see it right here, it's actually right there. So I'm going to put up a picture right here, and in this picture you can see some coordinates, some latitudinal and longitudinal coordinates. These are actually the coordinates in Kutztown, Pennsylvania for Saucony's first factory founded in 1898 along the Saucony Creek. So I think that thing is really cool. I love stuff like that, so very well done, Saucony. Now with regard to the fit of the shoe, the first thing that I would say is that Lori and I both thought this fit exactly where other Sauconys fit and pretty much right exactly where industry standards should be. So excellent job there. So if you wear a size whatever in one shoe, you're probably going to wear a size whatever in this shoe. So have confidence when buying this. In terms of the individual sections of fit, as we go into the rear foot, as I mentioned, a really nicely shaped heel cup by that rigid heel counter back here. It's good enough actually that you could probably get some splay outward, though again, keep in mind that it's a little bit rigid in that heel cup there. So if you have a particularly high volume or wide heel, it might be a little bit of trouble, but for on the wide side, not necessarily wide or average and maybe even below, there is flex to be able to come in on that. As we move into the midfoot, this is one of those places where I'm kind of actually reminded of Topo athletic shoes, and that Topo has a great fitting heel, a great fitting midfoot, and then the great fit of the forefoot actually kind of blossoms, and you feel that in this shoe too. So moving into the midfoot, we have a really nice feel. Again, I do wonder what it would be like with that ProLock or ISOFIT system kind of up in here, but a great fit that doesn't require too much hammering down on the laces, and again, keeps it very breathable while keeping out debris. But as you move into the forefoot, you can see that this guy right here has good room. It actually reminds me of the Saucony Kinvara a little bit, maybe even a little more width. And you can see here, it looks like there's probably, and then if you overlay these two, there's a little bit more width in the Saucony Peregrine 6 than there is in the Peregrine 5. There is no sloppiness about it. It's actually a very comfortable fit and fits really well over the long haul. I hate having to adjust things many times over the course of a long run, or at least feel the fabric kind of give out and then have to be hammered down on, because you wind up cutting off the circulation to your feet right when you need it the most. And I never found that in this, even on some longer runs, 13 miles and above. The ride of the Peregrine 5 was definitely a highlight for me, and that continues into the Peregrine 6. It is a very responsive and lively ride, and I really do enjoy the articulation of these lugs underneath. And one thing, again, as I mentioned a second ago with the upper, is that this shoe doesn't really sag under you as you carry on in the miles. The material for me didn't feel to give way to kind of being just tired. It kept on going, and I still, even though I understand why Saucony did it and doing the wear testing and putting just the EVERUN back here in the heel, I would still love to see a full-length piece of EVERUN in this guy the same way they did in the Triumph ISOFIT 2, Triumph ISO 2. Something I should mention is that it is a tad bit like this much heavier than the Peregrine 5. This comes in at 10.7 ounces in my men's size 11, and then in my men's size 11 in the 5 it was 10.5 ounces. Yes, it's only 0.2 ounces difference, and I would think that it could easily be chalked up to the additional 4 millimeters of stack height across the board here. So not a big deal. 0.2 ounces is nothing to worry about, and in fact the enhanced grip on here is well worth it. I said at the outset of this review that I was very curious to see how Saucony was going to improve on the Peregrine 5, and they've actually done a really great job. Don't get me wrong, the Peregrine 5 still a fantastic shoe, still a shoe that I'll bust out and run in from time to time, even though I have a full docket of running shoes to review. But this is such a great shoe that Lori has even said that she's probably going to buy a pair even after her ones that she has now are worn out. And that's saying something, because, well, she doesn't really have to buy shoes very often. Another thing that bears mentioning is that this comes in at $120, which is $10 more than its predecessor, the Saucony Peregrine 5. Now, one thing that I should mention is that I feel like that is a perfectly acceptable price, and based on the kind of production schedule of things, I would not be surprised if by kind of mid-summer, end of the summer, you can begin to find this for a little bit cheaper than that, and we may even have it down in those buy links we mentioned earlier, so be sure to check those in the description. Once again, Saucony is a great shoe with the Peregrine 6, and while it is early in the year, this is certainly vying for one of our top spots in terms of trail shoes for 2016. Guys, before we get to our question of the day, don't forget to like and favorite and subscribe to this channel. Subscribing is a huge thing for us. We are driving toward big goals this year, and we need your help getting there. So thank you to all those of you that have done it so far. Please share with your friends, and to those of you that are not subscribed yet, please do. Now, here is our question of the day, and that is that with 6 iterations now of the Saucony Peregrine, have you tried them? And if not, why? Let us know down in the comments section below. Guys, thanks again for spending a few minutes with us today, and don't forget, as we mentioned at the top of this review, those buy links down to the thing below there, they help support Gearist and really mean a lot to us when you do that. Also, if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to email info@gearist.com or reach out to us on all of our social media outlets, which you can see right here, or just click right down here, go to gearist.com and click on the contact us link. We would love to hear from you, love to answer your questions, and especially love to get your content up on our Ask Gearist series. So we look forward to hearing from you. Once again, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.